Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you all had a great few weeks and I hope you're ready for more photography reviews. Now, if you've never been here before, my name is Jakub. I'm professional landscape photographer based in England, and this show is my way of staying in touch with our photography community. What we're gonna do? Well, we're gonna look at images from our photographers, and I usually do it the way that I look at three aspects of each image. I look at the technical part. This is where we look at things like exposure, sharpness, noise, and all that fun stuff that works as a base for every photo. After that, we look at the artistic part. This is where I like to look at the composition, storytelling, framing, main subject, and everything that really creates the impact on the viewer. And on the top of it, if I think that it's beneficial and we have a time, I also like to give you some tips and tricks on photo editing, where in this show we use application called Luminar Neo. Well, if you're on our channel, most likely you know the application. However, it's a great photo editing application and you can find out more about it following the link in the description of this video. But please don't worry, if you don't have Luminar Neo, it's not a big deal. Most of the editing tips I'm gonna be giving can be used in any photo editing software. So now we know what we're gonna do, but how can you join us? How can you send us your photos? So I'm gonna look at them here at the show. Well, the easiest way to do this is to join our Clever Photographer membership. Now, to find out more about it, head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership. And by doing that, you will find out more about the Clever Photographer Plus. It's a membership or program where every month, for a little fee, you will get access to this photography review show. You will be able to send your own images. You will also get access to our Clever Photographer Academy Facebook group. But most importantly, and something that our photographers love, is to get access to our monthly photography bundle. Each of these bundles includes over 300 digital tools. And what's inside? Well, presets for Luminar Neo, Lightroom, and Photoshops, overlay, LUTs, textures, backgrounds, and all that fun stuff that really help us to keep having even more fun and be creative with our photos. So now you know what we're gonna do, you know how to join us in the future. So let's get everything out of the way and start with the reviews. Now moving into Luminar Neo, where we're gonna spend most of our time in catalog module. This is where we can see the images and also see the details of the different captures. Starting with captures from David and his two dog photos. So let's have a look at it. Let's start with the first one, make it nice and big. And as I mentioned, the first thing we're going to look at is the technical part, the details on the camera settings, and also the overview of the sharpness, noise, exposure, and so on. So let's do that. We have this image, so we're going to look at this corner here in the top right side of our screen, where we can see that it was captured with the Canon R7 with the lens 50 to 100 millimeters. And from the camera settings, ISO 800, 80 millimeters, f1.8, and 1/1000 of a second. So let's have a look at it. A little bit higher ISO, but then again, talking about the speed of the animal moving, the shutter speed, that amount of 800, similar to wildlife and animal photography, is perfectly fine. So that's a good start. 80 millimeters, so quite zoomed in with the f1.8 f-stop. That's what I'm quite interested in, on how the depth is, how the sharpness is through the image. And 1/1000 of a second, basically just make sure that you have a animal in a full focus and there is no motion blur. So from the camera settings, all good there. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little closer and have a look at the actual image. First, what we're looking at is a digital noise, which actually, even with the 800, is very well managed. If you applied a little bit of noise reduction or something like that, I think it worked very well. Now, talking about the shutter speed and the f-stop. So looking at it, you can see that the nose and the mouth is slightly soft, And I think the sharpness start probably from somewhere around here, just after the nose. You can see that the hair with the bows is fully in focus, as well as the hair around, again in the center here, and then probably the the legs or the paws are at a similar distance from the camera as the nose, and this is why they are also a little bit soft. Now I have to say that this is a great example of an image where normal person looking at the image wouldn't be zooming in and looking at the different areas. What they would be looking at is that it's very well captured. It really creates beautiful motion. It creates kind of happiness and happy feeling of the dog having lots of fun in forest. And I think that's why it works very well. The overall sharpness is very good. There is a great level of details. And more importantly, what I really enjoy is the fact that there is all these details in the foreground. So we have the leaves as well as the tree and the dog. And then there is this really lovely, almost a romantic soft background creating a lovely autumn scene. And I think the combination of all of that is creating a really beautiful image. So in overall, I think it works very well. I also like the diffused light. And yeah, so technically, I think actually it's very well put together. When it comes to the artistic part, the composition and the framing, again, I think it's very well done. I think there's lots of things that help to add more attention towards the main subject and also help to just get a really nice result. So things I really enjoy on it, again, is the depth of field, little bit of softness in the foreground, lovely softness at the back, not completely blurred out, but just kind of giving the really nice background feel of the autumn forest. Next thing I really like are that kind of little diffused colors. So it's not like strong green and strong yellows and strong browns. I think it's just nicely tuned together, which in overall creates a very nice natural result. I also think that the tree and the leaves in foreground just creates really nice depth. And in overall, the portrait framing with the dog in the center jumping over the tree really creates very balanced composition. And again, it really creates beautiful focus on the main subject, which obviously is the dog. So well done there. Post-processing wise, what I was just looking at is maybe a little bit of sensor dust here, maybe just a few things you could just kind of finish off with a simple brush or any erase tool. Obviously here in Luminar Neo, since we already here, just a quick jump into the erase tool where you can use the brush, or you can also use a tool called remove dust spots. You just click on that, and what it does, it basically scans the image, look for all these little imperfections and remove them. If I reset it and zoom in a little closer, you can see that there is a little bit there. So one click and it's gone. So one way to do it. And that way you just end up with a very nice clean result. Nothing more, everything else works very well. So let's move to the second image, which kind of gives us a similar idea, right? So anyway, we're gonna go through it just a little bit faster, but let's one more time revisit the camera settings, which looking at it are pretty much the same as for the first image, except you went a little bit further with the lens all the way to 100 millimeters, which could be because of the size of the dog, or yeah, you just wanted to crop in a little closer. Looking at it again, same camera, so the Canon 50 to 100 millimeters, same ISO 800, 100 millimeters on the lens, f1.8 and 1/1000 of a second. So straight into the image, zooming in, looking at the sharpness, same focus, again, around the eyes and a little bit of the paws and also the ears. I think the dog is super cute, actually. It really makes me happy on this otherwise gloomy Tuesday day here in UK. So it's very, very nice. I think the sharpness is great. I think because with this dog, you can't really see the eyes. You a little bit looking around for the sharpness, where here you can clearly see that the sharpness is around the eyes, which I think is well put together. And again, in overall, when you look at the image, I think it creates beautiful result. So I would probably repeat lots of stuff here about the composition, about the artistic part. It's all same things, lovely depth, lovely soft background, lovely colors, very natural edit, great attention to the main subject. So all in all, just a great result. David, I love both of the images. They are beautiful, well captured together, great technique. So well done, congratulations, and thank you for sending your photos over. Moving into landscape photography, now we're gonna look at images from Elizabeth. Elizabeth also sent us two photos, one with this epic waterfall and another one with stunning reflection. So let's start with the waterfall. Elizabeth, looking at the camera details, Canon RP 15 to 30 millimeters, and from the camera settings, ISO 100, 20 millimeters, f13 and 1/10 of a second. So starting from the beginning, very nice and low ISO. The goal is as close to 100 as possible, so that's all good there. 20 millimeters, quite wide, giving us this nice view here. And f13 with 1/10 of a second first give us this lovely, kind of almost like a long exposure effect or feel. And the f13 just give us the sharpness all the way through, and it makes it all manageable with that triangle of ISO, shutter speed, and f-stop. So looking at it, okay, starting with the noise, zooming in, obviously with the ISO 100 and with the overall look of the photo, I think it works really well. No problem there. F13, yeah, the sharpness pretty much from the beginning or foreground all the way to the background, to the trees there. So that's all good too. And again, 1/10 of a second, giving you this kind of smooth looks, which I think looks quite well. Now, looking at it, everything looks good. Obviously, there is some water which probably ended up on your camera going through here at the bridge. And also one thing that looks just a little bit like a gray and just a little distracting is this part of the sky here. Again, not necessarily because of the sky here, but a little bit because of the white glow or the bright glow around the trees. So it's just kind of a little bit distracting there. Otherwise, I think it works very well. I think it's well captured, good sharpness, good noise, no noise, and yeah, good overall exposure. So that's all good there. Now, talking to the artistic part, in overall, it's a lovely edit. It's very natural, very kind of moody, cold feel to it, with well-handled white balance, the overall saturation, and the overall edit. As I say, one thing I would keep an eye on is this white glow here. I don't know if you have darkened this part in post-processing or if you have tried to replace it with something. Either way, it's just a little distracting there. And in general, any of these glow or chromatic aberrations can be distracting, but they're even more visible when they are bright, simply because human eyes are pretty much programmed to focus on a contrast in the image. And when it comes to contrast, it will always look for the brightest part or brightest part of the photo. So when I look at the image first, the first thing I'm looking at is a waterfall. But then when my eyes start to wander, this is also quite visible. So just something to think of. Also, one thing I wonder if you could kind of rotate it a little bit. It just feels like it's turning just a little bit. So let's jump into the edit module and the crop tool and see if we could just maybe rotate it a little bit to somewhere around here. And if that would give us just a little bit more straight capture. So maybe something like this. Other than that, I really like it. As I say, I already mentioned that the overall composition is very good. There is a little bit of foreground with the stone. The long exposure gives you a sense of the movement. I think the contrast between the smooth water and the rest of the image and texture works really well. It's also positioned very well on these two golden points on the rule of third, which again add even more attention. The contrast of the luminosity or the brightness, again between the waterfall and the rest, works really well too. So I think artistically it's very well done. Post-processing, not much I would do, maybe just slight enhancement here just to kind of live up the image a little bit. And additionally, I would add even more brightness to the waterfall to get it stand out even further. And this can be done with anything like simple brush with extra brightness. So if I bring the strength down to, let's say 60, and now just brush over the actual waterfall, it will just add a little bit of extra attention to it. Let's have a look before and after. It's not massive difference, but it just adds a little more attention to what is the main subject, and that's the waterfall. So that's the first image. Now, going for the second image. This one I think is epic. It's a beautiful photo, lovely reflection, great scene, and in overall just lovely impact of the photo. So looking at it and talking about the technical part first, Canon RP 15 to 30 millimeters with the camera settings ISO 2500, 15 millimeters, f13 and 1/250th of a second. So starting with the ISO, yes, it is on a higher side. Depending on the camera, I generally like to stick between 1000 and 2000 if I really have to go higher. Ideally below 1000, because I know with my camera that anything around 1000 and less I will be able to fix with noise reduction tools. Anything after can start to be tricky. It will depend on the conditions, it will depend on the subject and distance from the camera and so on. So yeah, 2500, sometimes it will work, sometimes it will not. You can see clearly when I zoom in that you start to see the artifacts, and especially these little batches of texture. They are often created with the AI noise reduction tools, regardless if it's done here in Luminar Neo or if you're using like noiseless AI or something. Sometimes they do create this texture, and sometimes I wonder if it's not even easier just to leave the noise in and kind of edit it in a way that it will look more vintage, almost like the noise is there on purpose, rather than trying to remove it and make it really unrealistic. So that would be just kind of note there. But clearly the idea here would be to lower the ISO, which would have to be done by bringing the f-stop down. So if you would say for a scene like this, somewhere around f7.1, f9, that would already help. On top of that, you could also shoot it with a little longer exposure. So you could go somewhere to, I don't know, 1/50th of a second or something. And that again, both would allow you to bring the ISO down. Now, I'm not sure if you have a tripod or not. Tripod would make it so much easier for you. You could go for much lower ISO, somewhere like, I don't know, 100, 200, 400. And by doing that, yes, you would have to use longer shutter speed, but the camera would be resting on a tripod, so there would be no movement and it would just work very well. And that way you would remove the problem with the noise completely. So really, probably when we're talking about the technical part, probably the biggest difficulty is the ISO here, and definitely something that just a little bit damaged the image. Other than that, the light is nice, as I say, reflection is nice, all works very well, but obviously the noise is a little bit distracting. When we're talking about the artistic part of the photo, I think it works very well. Again, the reflection, I'm a massive fan of it. The golden light there looks very nice as well. The foreground here with the little sand and the rocks create really nice depth. So I think all of this works. As I mentioned at the beginning, I think it's a beautiful photo, but just for the future, something to kind of do with the with your ISO, and that's lower the f-stop and increase the shutter speed, and that way you will be able to bring down the ISO. Anyway, both beautiful images. Thank you for sharing them with us, and I can't wait to see more of your photos in the near future. And now it's time to look at nature captures from Tony. Tony sent us 4 images, so let's go ahead and look at them. Let's just go through. We have this one with the flower and the bee sitting on it. Then we have another capture of the white flower with the yellow kind of inside part and with another bee or wasp on the side, another bee here on this lovely leaf, and finally a butterfly sitting on the flower here. So we're gonna look at 2 images at least, but let's just going through it. Looking at this one, obviously looking at it, probably the main subject is the bee. I mean, I quite like the fact that the bee is sitting there and then you still have the full flower. I think that works quite well. In overall, the contrast of the yellow, kind of brighter yellow, and a darker animal, I think works quite well. Again, making it stand out even further. This is a great example of talking about the composition and human eyes. We often mention that human eyes get attracted by the brightest part of the photo, which is the case in 90% of photos. But what happens when there is a lot of bright areas? Well, in that case, it's actually the opposite. The human eyes will get attracted by contrast, which in this case is the dark bee. So just kind of talking about composition. Let's go back to the image. Yeah, well, lovely captured, lots of lovely details, especially on the wings and around the animal. I think that works really well. And yeah, it creates a beautiful photo. Now, talking about this photo here, well, where on the first image, it's clearly, you can clearly say what is the main subject. is the bee sitting there on the top of the flower. In this one, because of the size of the animal, you could argue that the main subject and the center part is the flower itself, and the bee is just kind of supporting act, let's say, which in this case I think works really well. In my opinion, I would probably crop and zoom in even a little bit closer just to add more attention towards the center. I think these parts, since they cropped anyway, are not necessarily essential for the photo, and maybe they are even a little bit distracting. So let's just jump into the editing module where we can go into the cropping model and just basically crop the image. So I am cropping it in a way that the center is the main subject and this is just the supporting act. So in that case, let's not go completely all the way, but let's say somewhere around here should work really well. Hit enter, let it crop, and suddenly we have much more impact. And additionally, we can apply a little bit of extra vignette just to get a little bit more attention towards the center, and maybe add a little bit of inner light to add more brightness, towards the center of the photo. If we want, we can make it a little bit more dreamy using something like a mystical tool, which again brightens it up a little bit, but just make it stand out. So that's about this photo right here. Now, talking about this one, this picture is great. I really enjoy it. There's lots of lovely depth, lots of lovely texture. Again, the combination of the bee sitting on different texture, different line, different colors, I think works really well. And I think it's, just very, very well put together. Again, it's clear here what is the main subject, what we're focusing on, and just kind of zooming in. Again, lovely details around the animal and all over. And looking at the camera details here, this was captured with Canon 7D 18-235mm with the camera settings ISO on 200, 135mm, f8, 1/500 of a second. So nice and low ISO, no problem there. F8 in the combination with 135mm will give you this depth, so that's well captured. And the 1/500 of a second, give you a really nice sharpness. So well done, Tony. Well done, well put together. Would you want to crop it a little bit further? You could, but I think in overall, I think it works really well. Minimal noise, good sharpness, natural saturation, good contrast, good composition, great photo. And finally, the butterfly here. Okay, so let's also look at the details here. Canon 7D 18-135mm, nice and low ISO on 160. Again, all the way to 135mm. f8, similarly to the previous image, just to make sure that you keep the depth under control. And 1/400 of a second, giving us this really nice sharp result. Tony, I like a lot this image. The only thing I would probably pick up is the little harsher light, especially in this area, which looking at it with this kind of point of view, almost going to overexposure, like you can kind of see how you're losing some of the textures and details here. But otherwise, it's very well done. Again, the contrast of the white and animal with the background works really well. I quite like the fact that actually the background has that kind of natural pastel green, and also the butterfly has that kind of color, so I think that's actually a really nice combination together. The yellow in the center just kind of break the scene, which works really well, and I think it's very well done. I think out of the 4 images today, this one is my favorite. I like the little landscape crop, I like the attention towards the animal, the overall composition, the feel of it. I think it works super well. So, Tony, well done. Congratulations on all your images. Thank you for sharing them with us, and as always, I am looking forward to your photos in the next week's episode. And let's finish the show with 2 wildlife photographers. First, we're gonna look at Weasley. So we have 3 images, both in RAW and JPEG format, which again, looking at the capture and then the edited file. So starting with the bird right here, let's just zoom in a little bit and look at the camera details. So Nikon Z7 with 100-400mm, ISO 500, 400mm, f5.6 and 1/125th of a second. So from camera settings, little bit higher ISO, but no problem there. 400mm, obviously really getting close to the animals with the f5.6, giving you a good depth of field. I'm quite surprised how much of a texture and detail still you have at the background, but at the same time, looking at it, you can see that actually you are really far, so it kind of balances itself. Now, f5.6, yeah, again, probably bringing it together with the 1/125th of a second, and the ISO, looking at the light condition, is what you get, and I think it worked quite well. Nice light from the side, nothing too crazy, nothing too contrasty, so that all worked very well. And let's go and zoom in a little bit. Now, looking at the bird itself, the sharpness looks like it's somewhere a little bit else. It's not necessarily a motion blur, it's more the focusing area. I mean, when you look at the two next to each other, when you, for example, look at the actual wood here, or the tree here, or the leaves, they look a little bit sharper than the animal. I'm quite curious to see if you try to resolve it, maybe with one of the sharpening tools. However, looking at the raw file, you can see that clearly there is a little bit of softness on the animal. Sharpness is on other areas. Let's have a look again. I think you can kind of see that it's mostly visible here. But other than that, it's good. So that's the overall technical part. Now we're going to look at the edited result, because that's where we can really judge the composition and the overall feel. So looking at the picture, you can still see that there is still a little bit of softness there. And probably it kind of improved this area actually. It's a little bit better, but it's not completely pinpoint sharp, which is fine. Now, what I would say is that obviously the bird is the main subject. Again, maybe following one of the images from previous shows, I would probably crop and zoom in a little bit closer, maybe somewhere around here, you know, position the bird over the two golden points and really add more attention to it, you know. So something like this, I think, just adds more impact on the animal, make it more like the focal point of the photo, and also it removes some of the not necessarily interesting background. So this is what I would do. Other than that, I think it looks quite good. The overall white balance, it's a little bit warm, but I think it works very well. Well managed, the tint, saturation, overall feel, lively, bit of contrast to help the image stand out. So all in all, very well done. Moving forward on the image right here. So this is the raw file. This is the edited photo. Now I have to say, probably even more than on the first picture, you can really see how the animal isn't in focus, how I'm not sure where the sharpness was really, but you can see that, yeah, this is quite sharp, but otherwise it really is quite soft and blurry. I would not necessarily use this image, but it's just, I mean, it's a beautiful capture of the animal, but the sharpness is really somewhere else. And I just think that it would be way too distracting. In overall, obviously, I admire the fact where you managed to get all the way from here, which almost looks like you have maybe shoot through the glass, or you are really far, or the condition of the light wasn't really great because it looks really bright. Lots of noise there as well with the 12,800. So yeah, technically challenging image, probably challenging situation, but I always think that even when the conditions aren't great, when the light isn't great and so on, one thing that has to be right for the image to work is the sharpness, because that's really one thing that the human eyes catch up very quickly on, because yeah, that's what we do, right? It's just we don't get used to looking at things out of focus, and especially when it's the main subject. So even though you did very well recovering the image, the colors, the brightness, all of that, the sharpness still isn't there, and I think it's a shame. So with that saying, let's move forward on the next image, which is much better. So starting with the raw file here, looking at it, again, Nikon Z7 with 100 to 400 millimeters, manageable ISO around 2560 millimeters, so maybe with some adjustments or attachment to make it even further the zoom. F11 and 1/500th of a second. So looking at it, the animal, nice focus, little bit harsher light, but nothing too crazy. Yeah, and in overall good sharpness. The noise actually quite well managed. So all in all, very good. No problem there. Now, looking at the edited photo, talking about the artistic part, I think it works very well. What I would do, I would probably lower a little bit the saturation of the green. I think that itself would just help us to get a little bit more attention towards the main subject. We could crop it a little bit further, but it is really up to you. I would probably go as far as here, again, focusing on adding more attention towards the main subject, but it's more about the colors for me. So going into the color tool and HSL panel, I would start with the saturation, where I would just adjust the green down a little bit, maybe somewhere around -20. And similarly, I would go into the luminance and maybe make the green even a little bit darker. And by doing that, you can see as soon as I start to pull it down, how the main subject is standing out. I think that's really cool. What we can do here to even opposite it, to actually increase a little bit of the luminance of the orange and maybe a touch of the yellow, which will help to the animal again. Coming back to the saturation, again, a little bit of extra yellow for the animal will also help here. Otherwise, yeah, you could add extra vignette to add a little bit more attention there. You could make the background a little bit darker if you would want to, you know, just with a simple, let's say, minus exposure, masking brush, and just very quickly just kind of brush over the upper areas to darken them a little bit and create something like this. I think could work quite nicely, adding more attention to the animal again. So let's have a look before and after. And I think it just kind of helps it and help the animal to stand out. Since we're here still inside, another cool thing you could do is to actually turn it into black and white, and look how immediately all the attention turns towards the animal, where when you have the colors, there's lots of distraction, lots of things happening, and the human eyes can be a little bit overwhelmed. Once you turn it into black and white, clearly the first thing when you look at it is looking at the animal and clearly immediately know what the main subject is. And with a little bit of extra vignette, focusing more on the animal itself. So let's say that we would do something like this. We can get something like this, which I think is actually super cool. So again, from here to here. Weasley, thank you very much for sharing your images with us. It was a pleasure to review them, and I'm already looking forward to see more of your images in the near future. Okay, and the final photographer, who is Zdeněk. If you've been watching our show for probably 2 years now, Zdeněk is one of our regular contributors and photographers, and he actually lives in South Africa, where now they're heading into the spring and then of course summer, and he shared with us landscape pictures, a little bit of street photography, but also some still life photography, and most importantly, incredible wildlife captures, which us here in Europe or maybe north of America can't really capture, so it's always really exciting. We have seen lions and elephants and zebras and all that sort, and today we're gonna look at the buffalo right here, which actually is a beautiful capture. Now, the downside of Zdeněk being with us for so long is that quite often he sends us pictures which don't necessarily need any additional comments, but it's always great to look at them and just be impressed on what he can capture and how his photography keep moving forward. So this is a great example of a beautiful image. So looking at it, camera, Canon 5D Mark IV with 100 to 400 millimeters. From the camera settings, ISO 2500, 235 millimeters, f5.6, and 1/1250th of a second. So higher ISO, I mean, there is no hiding from that. Looking at it, you can a little bit see it from around the areas, not so much the background, but on the foreground, you can see that tiny little bit of dust there. 235 millimeters, so really kind of zoom in with the f5.6, giving you quite nice softer background and creating quite nice depth in the image. I think that works really well. The sharpness is on the animal's head, so I think that all works well. The details are there. There's a lovely level of details in the fur and the skin, so all of that works nicely too. 1/1250th of a second, giving me kind of sense that probably the animal was in movement. You can also see some of the kind of dust floating around and different areas, which is really nice. I think for this type of photography, it's one of the lovely techniques to really freeze the moment, to really get the feel of the dust and particles and texture and all of that. So yeah, this all works very well, no problem there. Nice diffuse light, kind of creating quite bright background, creating really nice separation of the animal and the background again. I remember when we were looking at the capture from Tony earlier, when we were talking about dark make subject on the top of a brighter area, which can really work. So this is another example of it. We have a kind of saturated, bright background with kind of darker, monotone main subject. But because of the contrast, it really works well together. What I like on it when it comes to composition. So one more time, the separation, the soft background with the detailed main subject works really well. The contrast of the colors, dark black with the yellow and warmth works really well as well. And in fact, I really enjoy the fact that it's kind of, there is not too many colors in it. You know, you have the kind of warm and little bit of green and orange, but it just really works together that it's kind of simple that way. I think if there would be mixture of greens and browns and reds, I think it would be a little bit overwhelming. This works really well there. The luminosity contrast works well. The overall framing and crop with the empty space in front of the animal create very nice overall and natural feel. And yes, it's just lots of positive things. Zdeněk, nothing much to add, to be honest. I mean, yeah, you could add little vignette. You could maybe, you know, just gonna really take a brush and play around with the animal and make even more dodge and burn on it. But it's already a really lovely natural result, so I don't know why you would need to do that. But you could play around with it, you know, with a little bit of extra exposure, just a simple brush on maybe like a 60. And then you could just kind of play around with some of the areas, just highlighting them like right here on the animal itself. And maybe, yeah, just following the light, which is already there. You're just making it a little bit more visible. So something like this, maybe on the nose, maybe if I zoom in even further, yeah, you know, just kind of talking about the different parts there and just highlighting different parts. Yeah, something like this. And then, of course, once you're done with that, you close it and you actually go minus in exposure. And this is where you're just going to highlight some of the darker areas on the image. So maybe one right here, one right here. Also, I think maybe on the side here. Now, it's not perfect masking. We don't have a time for that, but it will give you an idea on what I mean and what can definitely add, yeah, just a little bit more overall texture. So it's very subtle, not a massive difference, but when you look at it before and after, it just helps the animal to stand out. And since we're already here, let's apply the vignette actually. Just move it around a little bit. I think choose subject somewhere around here, which I think, yeah, again, can give us little bit of help. So there you have it, Zdeněk. Here is quick before and after. It's all just a game of playing with the lighter and brighter areas. And I think it can just add a little bit more depth to the overall photo. As always, if you have more images, make sure you send them for next week's episode. I'm here now. I'm here to stay. So I can't wait to see your photos. And the same goes to all of you folks. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying all the way until the end. I hope that you're enjoying autumn or spring, whatever it is in your country right now. And make sure that you get your camera, get out there, capture your photos, and then come and join us for the next episode of Photography Review Show. For today's episode, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy it, like, share, and comment on it. And also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our future content. My name was Jakub. Guys, have a great evening and I'll speak to you again next week.